Well, the huge news yesterday finally happened. Aaron Rodgers, a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, tweeting it out that they have agreed to terms on a one-year deal with Aaron Rodgers. We want to welcome in a Steelers great. Bryant McFadden won 2 Super Bowls with Pittsburgh. B-Mac, it's different. I know you say this a lot. It's different when you're a member of the Steelers organization. It's a camaraderie. It's a brotherhood. It's a different culture. So how do you feel welcoming Aaron Rodgers into your gang?
Man, if I was in front of Aaron Rodgers right now, Chris, I'd give him a big hug, a big family reunion type of hug, because he is a Steeler. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler. It's a brotherhood there. Once you're a Steeler, you're always a Steeler, in the words of Mike Tomlin. And, you know, it's been an overdrawn waiting process for Aaron Rodgers, but I swept all of that under the rug, knowing that he will be a Pittsburgh Steeler and he wants to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And let's get together. Let's try to go ahead and do everything we need to do. I continue to say we, but for them to be able to put together a quality, competitive team that can get close to trying to hoist a sticky Lombardi, first ballot Hall of Famer for Aaron Rodgers. So what he's trying to do now is add to his impressive NFL resume, and hopefully he has a lot to add to that resume this season.
B-Mac, it's been a while since you guys have had a prolific duo at quarterback and wide receiver. I mean, probably go back to, what, Big Ben and Antonio Brown? I mean, almost a decade ago. How do you think Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf are going to work out as a duo?
I think they're going to have a lot of success. You remember a few months back, there was video footage of Aaron Rodgers throwing to DK out in L.A. That wasn't just a coincidence. That was pretty much planned, in my opinion, because I think Aaron Rodgers DK at that time was already a Pittsburgh Steeler, and he wanted to throw some potential passes to his potential wide receiver one. And the relationship that they will create there in Pittsburgh, it should be felt by opposing defenses. Number one, DK, he's a massive individual. When you look at his stature, he's shown the ability to be a game breaker. And he's shown the ability to be a playmaker. And we know what Aaron Rodgers has done, even going back to a year ago, when he finally got things rolling with Davante Adams. They were cooking week in and week out. So that is what I'm hoping we will see from start to finish with Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf for 2025.
Seems like everything in Pittsburgh was kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for this Rodgers thing to break. Well, now maybe the dam has broken. What might that mean for T.J. Watt as he enters the final year of his deal, maybe looking for a new mega deal to stay there in Pittsburgh?
Well, I think they're going to find a way to, number one, retain T.J. Watt, keep him in a Steeler uniform, and give him the contract that he is deserving of seeing. One thing we know about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'll utilize Cam Hayward as an example, they find a way to keep their homegrown players happy, especially when they've been productive. And no other player has been more productive in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform than T.J. Watt, when you look at his game-breaking ability and just taking over ball games. And also, too, if you're T.J. Watt, you know, part of his leverage in terms of the contract that he's looking to receive is, look at what the team is when I'm not in uniform. When he's been dealing with injuries and not participating, they're not the same team. And oh, by the way, that's a unusual thing to say for a guy who only plays on the defensive side, because when he has not been in the lineup, it has really affected the offense as well. So he has a lot of leverage. It's about finding the right number. And I do believe Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin will find a way to get this thing done by the start of training camp so they can have all their key components in uniform ready to rock and roll.
Let's look at this season as a whole, B-Mac, and some interesting matchups. It starts with a rematch, Rodgers against the Jets in New York. Rodgers is also going to play his former team in Green Bay. When you look at the schedule here, what do you see for your Steelers?
Another winning season for Mike Tomlin. I see best case scenario, Chris, 10 wins, 7 losses. And here's why. When you look at Mike Tomlin, just from the coaching side of things, he's shown the ability to do more with less, especially at the quarterback position. You can throw out a year ago, right, 2024, when they won 10 games. But look at what he did in 2023. They were 10-7 then with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, he was able to orchestrate a 10-win season. So one would think, even though Aaron Rodgers is much older than the previous quarterbacks, I think he still has more ability left as well. So if you were able to muster up a 10-win season in 2023, the same can be said in 2024 with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, oh, by the way, who kind of flatlined towards the end of the season. When you look at the losing streak they were in the midst of, one would think with a highly motivated Aaron Rodgers and Chris, who played some of his best football toward the latter moments of the season, he gets into this offense, gets acclimated, and get things rolling. I believe a 10-win season is definitely a realistic number for Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
The last time the Steelers had a losing season, Rodgers had just transferred from community college to Cal. Now he turns 42 years old this December. Looking back on the expectations we had for the Jets, they were way too high. It never came close to realizing what we may have expected as the ceiling for that team. What's the ceiling for this Rodgers team? Can they be a real contender in the AFC?
I'm not quite ready to say that because, to your point, the expectations was too far-fetched for the Jets when Aaron Rodgers became a member of their organization. But me personally, a playoff team, get into the tournament. One thing you can say about the AFC this season, it will be a very, very competitive conference, starting with the top three dogs, right? Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore. Then you look at what the Chargers are doing. You look at the resurgence of the Denver Broncos. There's a lot of quality teams. So if these are the Pittsburgh Steelers get into the playoffs now, they've been able to do that over the last few years, and they flatline. But if you can get into the playoffs now, that actually checks off one of the achievements that you would like to get in the beginning of the season, because that's the only way you have a legit chance to do what? Compete for a championship, is by being in the tournament. If you're not in the tournament, you have no shot. So that's my expectation. Find a way to get into the playoffs and then erase some of the playoff woes that we've seen in previous years and try to make things a bit interesting.
Do you think, though, that the organization feels like Rodgers gives them a chance to win the whole thing? Because why even make this one-year move if you're just going to end up in the same spot that you've basically been ending up the last 15 years?
Yes, Chris, I do. And here's why. They were willing to wait for Aaron Rodgers. And even though Aaron Rodgers has made it known that he will sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I believe, Chris, if this was July, they would still be willing to wait for Aaron Rodgers because, to your question, I think they believe he is the piece that is needed for them to get over the playoff hurdle they've been facing over the last few years. And like I said, 2023, they were a 10-win team. Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph. 2024, they were a 10-win team with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. I believe Mike Tomlin believes Aaron Rodgers, even though he's older, he still has the skill set that some of those quarterbacks that he's coached in the previous years did not have, which actually could be that final piece of the puzzle. And I'm just giving my sentiments on your question. I do believe they feel like Aaron Rodgers, because why else would you be willing to wait as long as the Pittsburgh Steelers were waiting for Aaron Rodgers to make it known, right? It felt like you had other suitors, other potentials. Like, no, that's who I want because we believe he is the best available option.
Well, it finally happened. Aaron Rodgers has agreed to a one-year, $10 million deal to become the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Rodgers still needs to pass his physical and put pen to paper, but the marriage everyone saw coming is about to be consummated, and the four-time NFL MVP is about to become a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Rodgers' Hall of Fame stats since becoming a starting quarterback were incredible in Green Bay, and then things got a little wonky when he went to the New York Jets. Of course, lost a whole season thanks to a torn Achilles tendon. And then last year, the record wasn't so great, although the performance wasn't terrible at the end of the season. And now he starts anew in the Steel City. And let's say hello to our NFL analyst on CBS Sports, Bryant McFadden. Of course, won 2 Super Bowls with the Steelers, played for Mike Tomlin and against Aaron Rodgers in the Super Bowl, and John Breech, who's John Breech, and we love him for it. So let's start with you, B-Mac, about the impact of Aaron Rodgers with the Pittsburgh Steelers. What do you think are the big things that he brings to this team that they need this season?
Hope because of who he's been. throughout his professional career. Granted, he's at the end of his career, but just saying Aaron Rodgers makes you feel optimistic about what he could provide for a successful organization in the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think he gives more cachet than if you were to say, well, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mason Rudolph going against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. It doesn't hit the same. But if you said you have the Pittsburgh Steelers led by Aaron Rodgers going against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, it hits differently. So he gives you an element of hope and just being optimistic that he can maybe hit lightning in a bottle here or there that could really get this team to in an area they haven't been in quite some time. And I'm not going to sit here and say they're a legit championship competitor with Aaron Rodgers, but I do believe if Aaron Rodgers that we watched show up from the Jets in the last 4 or 5 ball games show up for Pittsburgh, I think that will put them in positions to win a lot more ball games than lose them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with B-Mac here. Hope is the perfect word. Help me, Aaron Rodgers, Kenobi. You are our only hope. Look, he's 41. I'm not sure how much he has left in the tank, but I'm certainly not going to hold his 2 years in New York against him. That is a black hole for quarterbacks. They struggle there. He had the Achilles injury, and then coming off that last year, wasn't at full strength till really the second half of the season. As B-Mac said, he looked really good during that second half of the season. And the one thing Aaron Rodgers does for this franchise is that he is a 4-time MVP. He is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And the Steelers have really been in quarterback purgatory since Ben Roethlisberger retired. You look at their Week 1 starters over the past few years, whether it's Mitchell Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Justin Fields. There is not a name that is a headliner. That's what Aaron Rodgers does. And the other thing is he's signing a 1-year contract. So everyone in that organization, from Mike Tomlin down to everyone on the roster, they know this is the last dance. This is the only dance. You get one shot with Aaron Rodgers, so I think the Steelers are going to play the season with their backs against the wall, knowing we got to win it with Rodgers this year or we're back at square one in the quarterback department. So I love this signing for the Steelers.
They might be back to square one in the quarterback department whether or not they win this year because it's a 1-year deal for $10 million. But somebody in the league office either has a sense of humor or they're clairvoyant because Week 1 on CBS at 1 p.m. Eastern and streaming live on Paramount Plus. Oh my goodness, it's the Jets hosting the Steelers and a possible Aaron Rodgers versus Justin Fields matchup in Week 1 of the regular season. All right, B-Mac, first of all, do you think they knew? Second of all, how crazy is it that Aaron Rodgers is going back to the place where he came from and also where he tore his Achilles playing the Jets in Week 1?
Well, I think the NFL were hoping Aaron Rodgers would make this a reality as a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers because it adds more pizzazz to this game. And like I said earlier, when you have Aaron Rodgers, that name alone makes you feel a little more intrigued. Because if this matchup consists of Justin Fields and Mason Rudolph, it doesn't hit the same. But now, to your point, Russ, it's Aaron Rodgers, the future first ballot Hall of Famer, multiple-time MVP quarterback, Super Bowl winning quarterback. It gives a little different flair, along with the quarterback swapping that we've watched with Pittsburgh swapping quarterbacks with the Jets and vice versa, playing in MetLife Stadium. His first game as a Steeler will be against the organization that he once joined 2 years ago. So I love it, and I love that we have the luxury of playing and showing that game for all the football fans because that is going to be a star-studded game, especially when you add Aaron Rodgers into the fold.
Yep, absolutely. Look, if you were going to make a winners and losers list of the Aaron Rodgers signing, CBS is one of the top 3 winners because we are getting his first game and he's going for revenge against his old team at 1 p.m. And that really tells you about how the NFL felt about if this game was going to be Justin Fields looking for revenge against the Steelers. Well, they threw it at 1 p.m. I think if they knew Aaron Rodgers for sure was going to be playing in this game, this probably would have been a primetime game. Instead, we'll take it at 1 p.m. That's fine. And really, the Steelers' schedule is a lot more intriguing, a lot more juicy now that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. I mean, there are so many games that are essentially must-see TV. It's not just that Week 1 game against the Jets. You look at the Week 8 game against the Packers, where Aaron Rodgers gets his first crack to beat his old team, and if he beats Green Bay, he becomes the 5th quarterback in NFL history to beat all 32 teams. We get to see Aaron Rodgers against all his old NFC North rivals, the Vikings in Dublin. You got a game against the Bears, the Lions. And then, as B-Mac said, you have a bunch of QB showdowns because you have Aaron Rodgers against Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, Aaron Rodgers against Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And let's not forget, Aaron Rodgers has 4 MVP awards. He gets to face the reigning MVP, Josh Allen, there in Week 13. So this is just a fantastic schedule from top to bottom now that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for the Steelers.
And one more note about that Game 1 game against the Jets. Wasn't it Aaron Glenn of the Jets who had Rodgers fly in only to tell them, yeah, you're not our guy anymore. Yeah, it's just another thing to add to that chip on Rodgers' shoulder before Week 1. And by the way, that leads me into the next thing, because Mike Tomlin is going to work with Aaron Rodgers. And BMAC, I want to ask you about their relationship and how that's going to work. But also, how much is he going to have to sort of rein Rodgers in? Because Rodgers has a lot to prove. And Tomlin, I'm sure, is going to want to make sure that maybe Aaron doesn't try to do too much right off the bat.
Well, I believe their football relationship will be smooth. It will be a smooth transition for either side, and here's why. There's always been a genuine football love for Aaron Rodgers towards Mike Tomlin and vice versa. The same can be said for the mutual respect they've had for each other in terms of what they've done throughout their professional career. So this is a different situation from what Aaron Rodgers walked into with the Jets. Remember when he became a New York Jets 2 years ago? He instantly became the biggest football personality in the building. Well, that's not the case in Pittsburgh. It starts and it stops with Mike Tomlin. That's not the case in terms of chasing championship prestige. They have that. Pittsburgh they have 6 sticky Lombardis that have all been accomplished without Aaron Rodgers. The Jets, the last championship was in the 60s. So they've been clawing and fighting for some type of championship success for quite some time, and that's why they went all in and hoping that Aaron Rodgers can get them to a place they haven't been in quite some time. You can talk about the playoff woes of the Pittsburgh Steelers as of late, but we know they've been to the promised land more times than none. So I believe that will actually help Aaron Rodgers in terms of the pressure and the expectation compared to what he had to endure with the New York Jets.
Yeah, it's a little crazy how fate has kind of brought these two guys full circle, because the last time Aaron Rodgers or Mike Tomlin were in the Super Bowl was in the 2010 season when they faced each other. That was the Packers' win over the Steelers, as I know B-Mac remembers, because he played in that game. But when you look at Mike Tomlin, I think the one thing that maybe I don't think the Steelers are too worried about, as B-Mac said, Tomlin is the big personality in that building. Now, is there a chance that Aaron Rodgers comes with a little bit of drama? Certainly. He's been doing those Pat McAfee interviews once a week during the season for the couple years. Always a few headlines there, but I just don't think that is going to be a big issue in Pittsburgh. You look at the personalities that Mike Tomlin has worked with, he's always able to rein people in, whether it's Antonio Brown, who was pretty mild during his time with the Steelers, and then boom, he leaves Pittsburgh, kind of goes off the rails. Le'Veon Bell, pretty mild during his time in Pittsburgh, leaves the Steelers, and now he's a budding rap star. So you just have all these things that Mike Tomlin is able to keep in check and to handle within the organization. So I do think that Tomlin and Rodgers will be able to comfortably coexist in Pittsburgh.
No surprise that most of the spotlight's going to be on the 4-time league MVP showing up in Pittsburgh, legendary National Football League organization, but it's more than just Rodgers. Who has been added to this squad that can help Aaron and the Pittsburgh Steelers maybe be even better than they were as a 10-win team a year ago, B-Mac?
Well, of course, I could go DK Metcalf, but I don't want to go that direction. For me, I want to go with another player that a lot of people probably forgot about because he was injured a year ago, and that's 2024 first-round selection Troy Fautanu from Washington. Remember when they utilized the 20th pick overall in the first round on Troy, they visualized having a bookend tackle that played with the mentality that Pittsburgh folks love. Tough, gritty, grimy, and doesn't mind getting into a physical fight on the football field. But unfortunately, Troy didn't play one snap because of an injury. But guess what? He's healthy, which makes this Aaron Rodgers signing even more significant, because now having Troy back in the lineup, he can go to the right side. They can move Broderick Jones to his natural position, which is the left side, and potentially you have two short-end young outstanding tackles to protect the future Hall of Famer in Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. If you're the Steelers, you have to have an offensive line that can protect Aaron Rodgers because he's certainly not as mobile as he was 5-7 years ago. But I am going to go with DK Metcalf. BMAC, you mentioned him. The Steelers made the big trade for him. And if you look at Pittsburgh's offense, obviously George Pickens is gone now. So if you're Aaron Rodgers, who is he going to be throwing the ball to if DK Metcalf wasn't there? So I think acquiring him really probably played a part in kind of getting Aaron Rodgers over the edge that, hey, we can work in Pittsburgh. And if you look at the rest of the AFC North, the Ravens and the Bengals, who are perceived to be the two top teams in that division, they had 2 of the 12 worst passing defenses in the NFL last season. So those were 2 teams that struggled to stop the pass. Maybe they're a little bit better, but if you have DK Metcalf, you have Aaron Rodgers, you feel very good about that. And then one other thing with Aaron Rodgers is when you look at his most successful seasons, he's got to have a receiver he trusts in his system. We've seen it with Devontae Adams. We saw a little bit last year with Garrett Wilson. You go back to the Jordy Nelson days or even James Jones. Aaron Rodgers needs someone. DK Metcalf can absolutely be that guy. So Metcalf could have a huge year in Pittsburgh because I think Rodgers and him are going to connect a lot.
All right, John, I'm coming right back to you here. How about the offseason losses for the Steelers? Who are they going to miss this year?
I'm going to go with Najee Harris. Look, the Steelers' offense took 2 big hits. You lose your top receiver in George Pickens. You lose your top rusher in Harris. And I think that is a little more difficult to rebound from than maybe it seems. Look, the Steelers' plan makes sense. You bump up Jaylen Warren. But when you look at how many times Harris carried the ball last year, it was more than 250 carries. Jaylen Warren is not built to carry the ball 250 times. He's never gone over 150 carries in his career. Jaylen Warren is 5'8", a little bit over 200 pounds, so he's not a big guy, and I'm not sure he's a guy that's going to be able to get hit 200 times if he's carrying the ball if he gets over 200 carries. Then you look at the Steelers did. They obviously added a few running backs, Kenneth Gainwell. They drafted Caleb Johnson in the 3rd round. They've got Trey Sermon. So it is going to be a running back by committee, but it's going to be interesting to see who the top dog is if someone emerges, and if it is Jaylen Warren, if he can handle 200 to 220 carries, which is something he's never had to do.
Well, for me, it's George Pickens. It's George Pickens, and here's why. Aaron Rodgers, he hasn't had the luxury of having 2 wide receiver ones in quite some time. You got to go back to the Jordy Nelson and the Greg Jennings days, right? And he was outstanding throwing to those 2 outstanding wide receivers. He didn't have that same luxury in New York until Devontae Adams became a New York Jets. And we saw how he was able to get things going. So just imagine, guys, if Aaron Rodgers, who's highly motivated as it seems to be, joined the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's walking into a locker room where he has DK Metcalf and George Pickens. Wow. And if you're a part of the Baltimore Ravens secondary or the Cincinnati Bengals or the Cleveland Browns, you're starting to really gauge what these 2 guys could look like receiving passes from Aaron Rodgers. But because he's no longer there, if you're a part of the Baltimore Ravens secondary, Cincinnati, Cleveland, man, you're like, man, we dodged a bullet. Because it's already a heck of a day trying to contain DK Metcalf. But if you also had to try to contain and slow down George Pickens, it's like pick your poison. But he's no longer there. So that's why he is the biggest loss for me, because as I think about what ifs, it really hurts my heart knowing there is no what if because he's no longer there.
Put in the additions and also the subtractions. And BMAC, how do you see the Steelers doing this season after a 10-win season and a 2nd-place finish in the division a year ago?
10-7. 10-7. 10-7. John, Russ, they won 10 games a year ago. Mm-hmm. In 2023, with Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett, he won 10 ball games. That's the measuring stick, in my opinion. So if you're talking about getting Aaron Rodgers, as I said, if you watch how he finished the season last year with the Jets, he played really, really good football. If he can take that into this season, yes, it's a very, very difficult schedule, but the last time I checked, John, you know this being a Bengals fan, Mike Tomlin has never had issues winning in his division, regardless of who his quarterback has been. So now if Aaron Rodgers can just give him that one extra play they've been missing over the last few years, I see 10 wins happening for Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
All right, John and BMAC, thank you guys so very much. Let's take a look at what our friends at SportsLine have to say about how the Steelers are going to do, and the prediction from the algorithms say, about 8 wins, maybe 8.5 wins. 42% chance of making the playoffs. That's what the numbers guys at SportsLine say. BMAC says 10-7. By the way, so does John. Same as a year ago.